It wasn't rage I felt. Not the raw, pulsing kind that blinds you, no. It was something colder, something older. Like when you walk into a room that used to be warm, and only then realize how long it's been cold. That's what truth felt like that night. A chill you don't notice until it's already soaked through your skin. We were sitting at a long table in Megan's sister's house, just outside St. Louis. A spotless home, painted in those safe, forgettable shades of beige and slate. The kind of place that's meant to look lived in, but never feels it. It smelled like citrus cleaner and overcooked salmon. Megan loved it there, said it was peaceful. To me, it felt like a waiting room with wallpaper. There were candles on the table, wine glasses already half full. Evan was back from school sophomore year, some public university with a tuition bill that arrived in my inbox every semester like a summons. He wore that air now, that half-grown arrogance that clings to boys who think they've learned something just because they've been away from home long enough to forget who paid for the departure. He sat across from me, shoulders relaxed, elbows on the table like a prince in his own court. Megan was beside him, her hand grazing the stem of her glass, her gaze floating somewhere above the conversation. She always looked away when things cracked. Her sister, cheerful, oblivious, was asking about summer plans. A cruise, maybe. A family trip. And that's when it happened. It wasn't the words, not exactly. It was how they landed. How still the room became after they were spoken. Like a final page in a book. "We don't make decisions with him," Evan said. "Not raised. Not thrown. Just said. He's not part of the family. That's for me and Mom and Dad to figure out." I didn't flinch. I didn't ask which dad he meant. I didn't need to. There was only one man he reserved that title for, and it wasn't the one who kept the lights on in his dorm or the food in his fridge. It was the one who sent birthday texts and disappeared for the rest of the year. The one whose name still carried weight not because of presence, but because of myth. Todd. The man who contributed memory, not money. And Megan, my wife, the woman I had chosen to carry alongside, didn't say a word, not even a twitch. She didn't correct him, didn't soften it with a joke. She let it hang there like it was reasonable, like I wasn't sitting right there. I didn't say anything either, not because I was confused, not because I was hurt, but because, in that moment, I understood something I'd ignored for years. Lines like that aren't said by accident. They're drawn on purpose. That sentence hadn't been born at the table. It had been practiced somewhere else. In private. In the comfort of their blood-bound trinity, where the man paying for everything didn't get a seat. Evan wasn't lashing out, he was delivering a message. A final memo I hadn't realized I was waiting for. And Megan's silence? It wasn't passive. It was permission. It meant, he's right, but I won't say it. It meant, this is what we really think, but we'll let the boy say it, so it sounds like youth and not betrayal. For 16 years, I had been part of this structure. A supporting beam, present at every dinner, fixing what broke, catching what fell, funding what was dreamed. I gave not because I was asked to, but because I believed that eventually belief would become belonging. That one day, if I just stayed and gave and endured, they'd stop comparing me to the man who vanished before the ink dried on the custody papers. But in that sentence, Evan exposed everything. To him, I wasn't part of the family. I was a tenant, an ATM with a fading signature, a name not written into the bloodline, just stapled onto the bills. I took a sip of water. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. That surprised me. It wasn't heartbreak. It was inventory. I was taking stock of the moment, as if it were a receipt from a store I didn't remember shopping at. 16 years. School trips. Late-night pickups. Doctor visits. Mortgage payments. Birthday parties. Apologies. College applications. A car. Rent. Groceries. Gas. Tuition. More tuition. 1,000 little acts of presence. All reduced to, he's not part of the family. Not even said with anger. Just administration. Like announcing a boardroom restructure. I looked at Megan. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She smiled at her sister instead, as if nothing had been said at all. as if we weren't both sitting in the ashes of something we used to call a marriage. That silence? That was the real betrayal. Not the sentence, but what followed it. The ease. The indifference. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't squeeze my arm beneath the table. She didn't whisper, "I'm sorry," later in the kitchen. Because in her mind, I had been informed. She thought it was over. The announcement had been made. Maybe it had. I didn't finish my plate. The salmon had cooled. The wine had soured in my mouth. I excused myself from the table. Not dramatically, not angrily, just politely, like I had somewhere better to be. I didn't. I just couldn't sit in a room where my absence had already been priced in. That night, I lay in bed beside Megan, listening to the sound of her breathing, even, untroubled. I wondered if she even remembered what had been said, or if she had spent so long pretending not to see me that she had truly forgotten I could bleed. I stared at the ceiling and marked the moment. Everything before that sentence had been hope. Everything after it would be arithmetic. They had made their decision. Not emotionally, not in anger, just as policy. And I had finally understood. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father. I was a position. Vacant. I didn't speak that night. Not because there was nothing to say, but because I finally understood that words in this house were furniture. Nice to have. Never used. Megan went about her routine like it was any other evening. Teeth brushed. Moisturizer. Lamp switched off without a glance. As if the sentence Evan dropped at dinner had evaporated in the air instead of hardening into a coffin between us. I stared at the ceiling. Felt lower than usual. I listened to her breathing. Calm. Mechanical. The sound of someone at peace in a home she never had to build. And that's when it began. Not anger. Not revenge. Just checking. I got out of bed sometime around 2 in the morning. No sound. No announcement. My footsteps on the hardwood floor didn't even wake the dog. I went into my office and turned on the desk lamp. The same one that had lit every tax return, every tuition application, every utility bill over the last 16 years. The room still smelled faintly of paper and ink and tiredness. I sat down and opened the laptop. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I wasn't searching for an escape. I was surveying a battlefield. My fingers hovered over the keyboard like a surgeon before the first incision. The browser loaded. I logged into the first account. Joint checking. Then the college fund. Then the autopays. Subscriptions. Cloud services. Streaming accounts. Car insurance. Cell plans. Evan's card. The shared gas account. The backup savings Megan didn't even know had her name on it. One by one, I laid them bare. It was like watching organs pulse on a screen. Everything that kept this family alive. Everything they assumed worked by itself. And all of it had my name on the spine. I didn't touch anything yet. Not that night. I just looked. I needed to see it. I needed to confirm what I already knew in my bones. They hadn't just excluded me emotionally. They had disarmed me ceremonially, while still gripping every piece of my body to keep the machine running. Because the truth was simple. They didn't think I mattered, but they still depended on me like gravity. The hours passed. I didn't feel tired, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a fire, when you know everything has changed but the smoke hasn't cleared yet. At 7, I made coffee. Black. No cream. I stood by the window, staring out at the frost on the lawn. It hadn't snowed, but the air had that stillness, the kind that comes before a storm, or after something vital has stopped moving. By 8, I began the process. Not with a hammer, with a scalpel. I started with the small things. The Netflix account. Hulu. Spotify. Subscriptions to digital textbooks. A few shared logins that had followed Evan to college. Click, click, gone. Then the gas card. The one I'd set up when he turned 16, after I taught him how to drive. The one he used every time he went out with friends, every road trip, every visit home. Frozen. Then the phone line. His phone. The monthly bill with his name on it, paid through mine. I logged in. Removed the payment method. Then the debit card. The one I'd linked to his account when he started school. Told him it was for emergencies. even though I knew it was for everything. Deactivated. At first, the systems didn't respond. Takes a minute for the blood to stop flowing when the heart stops pumping. But then the alerts started. Ping. Payment declined. $13.47. Meal delivery service. Ping. Subscription canceled. Digital academic journal. Ping. Low balance warning. University cafeteria debit. Then came the text messages. First one. Then another. Hey, card not working? Weird. Is something wrong with the account? Need help with phone bill? It says unpaid? I didn't reply. I didn't even open them. Because those weren't messages to me. They were messages to a role. A function. A financial ghost. By noon, Megan noticed. She came into the office, her phone in her hand, concern on her face. Did you cancel Netflix? I nodded. Why? No answer. She blinked, confused by the silence. She tried again. Evan says his card isn't working. I nodded again, sipped my coffee. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man she married. But maybe, just maybe, she was finally seeing the one she had ignored. I don't understand, she said quietly. No, I replied. You don't. She stood there for a moment longer, waiting for something. A fight, an explanation, a rise. But I wasn't giving her a scene, just a mirror. She left without another word. By mid-afternoon, the house was shifting. Evan called twice. I didn't answer. He texted again. Longer this time. Something about needing to pay for fuel. That his class was tomorrow. That this was unfair. Still, I said nothing. Because it wasn't about punishment. It wasn't even about money. It was about recognition. And they had none left to give. By 4, Megan tried again. She waited until I was in the kitchen, cleaning a plate that no one thanked me for. She leaned against the counter like she was still trying to pretend everything was fixable. Evan's freaking out, she said, voice low. He says he needs money for books. I looked up from the sink. I thought his real father handled those decisions. She flinched, the first visible crack. That's not what he meant. No, it's exactly what he meant. The silence returned. And in that silence, something else happened. She didn't deny it. She didn't defend me. She didn't reach for my hand or my voice or my memory. She just stood there watching me dry a plate and realized, maybe for the first time, that I had meant it when I said nothing. Because silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's just the sound of a man realizing he doesn't need to ask for dignity. Sometimes silence is the system shutting down. The next morning, more alerts came through. University billing. Payment failed. Phone plan. Suspended. Utility company. Notice of change in account owner. Every institution that once leaned on me was now shifting, groaning, adjusting to my absence. And still, no one asked how I was. They just wanted to know why. Why the money stopped. Why the food account was empty. Why the gas card declined. Why the phone went dark. Why the hand that always gave had suddenly disappeared. But they never asked if I was okay. They never asked what Evan's words had done. They never once said, "We're sorry," because to them I was the backdrop, the scaffolding, the man behind the curtain pulling the levers that made the play go on. But when the curtains fall and the stage is bare, the audience never thanks the man who built it. They just complain the show is over. So I stood in the kitchen that morning, drinking coffee from a chipped mug I'd owned longer than Evan had been alive, and I realized something simple. They had never seen me, only what I gave. And now, finally, they were seeing the hole I left behind. They thought I would blink. They thought this was a negotiation. By mid-morning on the second day, the text shifted tone, no longer casual, no longer assumptive. Evan's first message had been short, almost annoyed. "Hey, card's not working again. Can you check it?" Then an hour later, "Seriously, I need gas. I have class." Then, "This is messing with my schedule, man. Man. Not Dad. Not Michael. Just man." Like I was a random contact in his phone. A vending machine with a number. By noon, he was calling. I let it ring. Every time. No voicemail. No text reply. Nothing. Silence has a way of changing people. It forces them to hear themselves. Then came Megan. Her tone was different now, laced with anxiety, but covered in calm. A politician in crisis management mode. She approached me as I was fixing the garage door, the same one Evan had broken last summer and never offered to repair. "I think this has gone far enough," she said. I didn't answer. She folded her arms. "You made your point, but this is affecting his education, Michael." Still, I said nothing. She tried again, softer. "He's just a kid. He says things. They don't always come out right." I finally looked up. "No," I said. "They come out exactly how he means them. He's old enough to vote, old enough to drive a car, old enough to decide who his family is." Megan flinched at that. "You're punishing him for being young." "I'm not punishing him," I said, standing up. "I'm removing myself from a role he said I don't belong in. That's not punishment. That's permission." She didn't reply right away, but I saw it. The hesitation. The moment when the script she was trying to follow stopped working. She had been counting on me to feel guilt, to crack, to fold the way I always had when emotions got loud. But guilt is a rope, and when it snaps, there's no tying it back. "You still live here," she said finally. "You're still married to me." "For now," I said. She took a step back, as if the ground had shifted under her. The conversation ended there, but the pressure didn't. That afternoon, Evan arrived home from campus. Earlier than usual. He slammed the front door hard enough to shake the frame. He walked through the living room with the posture of a soldier returning from battle. Angry, loud, looking for someone to blame for a war he started. I was sitting at the dining table, reading, quiet. He threw his backpack down. "You're screwing me over," he said. "You know that, right?" I didn't look up. "I've got exams, deadlines. I can't even pay for print credits." You froze everything. Still silent. "This is immature. You don't get to just pull the plug because of one comment." I looked up slowly. "It wasn't a comment," I said. "It was a position, and I accepted it." His mouth twisted. "I didn't mean it like that." I held his gaze. "Then say what you meant." He paused. The first real pause. Not the performative kind, but the kind where the brain finally catches up to the tongue. Then, quieter, "I was mad." "No, you were honest." He scoffed. "This is crazy. You're acting like I betrayed you." "You did." He blinked. "In front of your mother. In front of her family. You took everything I'd built, 16 years of time, effort, presence, and you threw it under the table like scraps. And she let you. And now you're angry that I listened? You're overreacting." "No," I said. "You're realizing." His face twisted into that teenage snarl. The one kids wear when they realize they can't lie their way out of a reckoning. "I don't need your money," he snapped. "Good," I said, "because you won't be getting any." And with that, I stood up and left the room. It didn't matter what else he said, because when people lose control of your wallet, they try to grab your conscience. But I had locked that away the night he decided I wasn't part of the family. Megan tried again that night. She waited until Evan went upstairs, probably to call his real father to remind him he still existed, and cornered me in the kitchen. "You're shutting him out," she said. "You've never done that before. I've never been told I was nothing before. You're not nothing." "No," I said. "I'm a man who made the mistake of believing effort creates belonging." She didn't respond, just looked at me like she was watching something fall apart but didn't know where to grab it. "I'm not doing this to hurt him," I continued. "I'm doing this to stop hurting myself." She blinked, like she didn't understand what I meant. That was the moment I realized she never had. The next day, the school called. A polite voicemail. The bursar's office. Unpaid balance. Risk of course withdrawal. Please call back. I didn't. Instead, I watched. I watched Evan pace the house like an animal sensing a fire it couldn't see. He tried pretending it wasn't happening. Tried leaning on Megan for solutions. She made calls. I heard her in the other room. Voice low, controlled, asking about extensions. Deadlines. alternate funding. But I knew the truth. There were no options. Because I had carried them so long, they never learned how to walk without me. By the third day, the tone changed again. From Evan. He knocked on my door. The first time he had done that in years. I didn't look up. "Michael," he said, voice quieter. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat. There was a long silence. Then he spoke. "I messed up." I nodded. Not in agreement. Just acknowledgement. "I said some things I didn't mean." "No," I said. "You meant them. You just didn't expect them to cost you anything." His face tightened. "I'm sorry. Are you?" He paused. "Yes. Or are you just uncomfortable now that the system stopped working?" He didn't answer. I leaned forward. "You had 16 years to call me father. You had 16 years to show me I mattered. You chose silence. And then you chose cruelty. And now you want access again because you're afraid. I just want to stay in school. And I just wanted to be part of the family." He looked down at his hands. Then at the floor. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "That's the problem," I said. "You never did." He sat there for a long time, hoping, maybe praying, that some part of me would crack. That I'd reach across the table and say, "It's okay." That I'd hit the reset button. But there was no button. Just memory. And consequence. He stood, finally. Walked to the door. Paused. Then, "What am I supposed to do?" I looked at him. "Ask your real father." He didn't slam the door. That was how I knew he was really scared. Megan cried that night. Silent, slow tears. The kind she didn't want me to see. She curled up on the far side of the bed, her back to me, like her sadness was something sacred, something I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. But I wasn't moved. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally knew that caring had become currency in this house. And I wasn't spending it anymore. They had drawn their line. And now they were learning what stood on the other side of it. Not a man. A wall. There was no explosion. No final argument. No dramatic shouting match on the stairs. No slamming doors. No storming out in the rain while someone cried on the porch. That's the mistake people make when they imagine endings. They expect them to be loud. They expect fire. But real endings are cold. They're quiet. They arrive like a skipped heartbeat. And by the time you realize something's wrong, it's already stopped working. That was how it ended with us. Not with rage. With indifference. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't send an email or write a letter or sit the family down like a company laying off its employees. I didn't shout, "I'm done," or pack a bag or sleep on the couch or wait for some symbolic last straw. Because the last straw had already been snapped. In public. With witnesses. And silence. I didn't need to leave. I simply stopped returning. Not physically. Not yet. But functionally. Systemically. The man they thought they could define into non-existence was finally acting like he didn't exist. And it turned out that was more disruptive than any tantrum. The house still looked the same. Dishes were still cleaned. The driveway was still shoveled. Dinner still arrived on the table most nights. But something had shifted. Something that could not be unshifted. I had stopped investing. Stopped engaging. Stopped reaching for connection that never reached back. When Evan spoke to me, and that was rare, I answered plainly. No hostility. No affection. Just logistics. If he asked for help, I gave him the same phrase every time. "You'll need to talk to your father about that." When Megan mentioned college, tuition, textbooks, deadlines, I nodded. I made no offers. I signed no checks. I was simply there, a piece of furniture that had stopped carrying weight. At first, they thought it was a phase, an emotional freeze-out, a punishment designed to melt with time. But time passed, and I didn't melt. I hardened, because something inside me had turned to stone the night Evan opened his mouth and Megan stayed silent. And when stone sets, it doesn't weep. It doesn't plead. It doesn't long. It just remains. That's the part people don't understand. Withdrawal isn't violence. It's just absence. And absence can be louder than screaming when it finally means something. 3 weeks after that dinner, I checked our joint account. Megan had moved some money, $1,000 here, Another 2 later. Nothing illegal. Nothing cruel. But she was adjusting, compensating, trying to stitch the wound without addressing the blade. She didn't tell me about it. I didn't ask. But I saw the fear in her eyes when she realized I had seen it. She was beginning to understand. I wouldn't stop her from surviving, but I wouldn't enable her to forget. By the end of the month, Evan had started skipping weekends home. He sent fewer messages, fewer calls. I imagined the conversations not with me but with Todd, the real father, the one who had vanished through most of high school, then reappeared during freshman orientation with a pair of new sneakers and a handshake that tried to stand in for a decade of neglect. I imagined Evan asking for money, for help, for a bailout. I imagined Todd's voice, hesitant, distant, confused at the sudden weight now placed in his hands. And I imagined Evan realizing that blood may be thicker than water, but it doesn't pay tuition. But I didn't bring it up. I didn't ask how it went, because I wasn't in it anymore. I wasn't on the board. I wasn't even on the list of emergency contacts. One night, Megan said we should go away together. Take a weekend. Just us, she said. To talk. I said no. She didn't push. Because deep down, she knew there was nothing left to talk about. That whatever bridge we were supposed to repair had never really existed. Just a floating illusion held up by sacrifice, routine, and denial. She still slept beside me. Still cooked for 3. Still smiled when guests were over. But every smile was smaller now. Every glance was thinner. We were becoming ghosts in a house that used to echo with purpose. And I didn't mourn it. Because you can't mourn what never saw you. You can only name it. And I had named it non-reciprocal investment. One day, Evan returned home unexpectedly. I heard his car in the driveway. A soft knock at my door. I opened it. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked exhausted. He said, "I just wanted to say thank you." For what? For everything. For, all of it. I didn't say it before. I nodded. He looked down at his shoes. "I talked to Dad. He can't help. He's broke. Says he's sorry." Another nod. Evan shifted awkwardly. "I'm trying to figure it out. The tuition. I might need to defer next semester." "I hope it works out," I said. He looked at me. Really looked. And I think, for the first time in his life, he understood something. That the door he thought would always reopen had finally locked. He nodded, swallowed hard, and left. That was it. No tears. No hug. No dramatic scene of reconciliation. Just a quiet admission that the father he chose wasn't capable, and the father he rejected wasn't coming back. Megan asked me weeks later if I changed my mind. If maybe, just maybe, we could revisit things. Not with Evan with us. With the family. I told her the truth. There is no us. There is no family. There was only me carrying all of it until I set it down. She cried. She said I was cold. That I was breaking something that still had pieces worth saving. I said, "Then why didn't you speak when it mattered?" She had no answer. Because when silence serves power, it becomes complicity. And now she was learning that complicity has a price. That spring I met with a lawyer. Quietly, calmly, no threats, no warnings, just paperwork. Financial separation, asset division, a clean severing of what they had always claimed I wasn't part of. I left the house 2 months later. Left the keys. Left the furniture. Left the dining room table I had built with my own hands one Christmas when money was tight but time was plenty. I didn't leave in rage. I left like a man walking out of a contract that had expired. I heard later that Evan dropped out. That Todd sent some money, then vanished again. That Megan was struggling to keep up with bills. She tried to contact me once. An email with too many words and not enough meaning. I didn't reply, because some doors don't open again. Not because they're locked, but because they no longer lead anywhere. People ask me if I regret it, if I wish I had tried harder, if I could have done something different. And here's the truth. I did everything. I gave everything. I was everything until they decided I was nothing. So I ask you now, whoever's listening, was I wrong? Was I cruel to stop carrying people who handed me my absence like a name badge? Or was this the only way to remind them that support is not a birthright? It's a choice, and when that choice is mocked, dismissed, and erased, isn't silence the only answer left? Tell me, would you have endured it? Would you have stayed? Or would you have drawn your own line and walked away?